thank you very much for the nice invitation. So yes, I'm going to talk about generative modeling. This will probably be the most applied talk of the workshop. So this is a joint work with a great team of collaborators: Othman Spy, Mathieu Aubry, Antoine Borde, Mohamed El Hosseini, Morgane Rivière, Yann Lequin, Michael Mathieu, Pauline Luc, Natalia Neverova, and Jacob Verbeek. So we are going we worked on several aspects to address GAN limitations, so finite resolution, lack of control on generation, and lack of novelty. So first of all, why do we care about generative models? So I think generative models are a great tool to help us achieve scene understanding with limited data supervision. If we want to check that a particular method understands the content of an image, building a generative model, a task where we generate new views that are not in the training data, would show that the model generalizes. So therefore, improving generative models can be seen as a necessary step towards unsupervised scene understanding. Reconstructing perfectly the data, on the other hand, is pointless, but generative models are becoming interesting if they go beyond the replicating training data. So in computer vision, in generative models, in particular adversarial ones, are becoming really prevalent as they may enhance artistic creations, inspire designers, prove usefulness in semi-supervised learning, for instance, for medical or robotic applications. So the outline of the talk will gather several works. So the first one was called Design Inspiration from Adversarial Generative Models. Second, we will see how to get higher resolution images in a decoupled generation pipeline. Third, we will talk about some vector image generation by learning parametric layer decomposition. And finally, if we have time, talk about some future frame prediction. So let's begin with some background. So what is a GAN? So it starts from a series of random numbers here, a latent vector that we call Z. Typically, it's a vector sampled from a Gaussian of size 100 or 200. It goes through convolutional operation in a generator, and then it generates an image. So at the beginning, the image doesn't look like anything meaningful. And there is another network that comes into play that's called the adversarial one, or the discriminator, that is trained to output a scalar, zero or fake, if it's a generated image that we give it in input, and it's trained to predict 1 if we give it a real image in input. So like this, I forgot to say that there is a feedback to the generator network that makes it predict images that look more and more like real ones. And so if we look at what's inside the generator, it starts with this Z vector of random numbers, and then you have several layers of convolutions and ReLU non-linearity, and then it outputs the free color channel of our image. Sorry. For the work I'm going to show, which was presented at an ECCV workshop, our motivation was to bring some extra criterion to adversarial networks to make it deviate from existing styles, as in another work that was called Creative Adversarial Network, a paper from El Gamal and others. Here we show how a kind of inspiration for what we did. The Venn curve here shows that as the novelty increases, people tend to like images or whatever better, and then when there is too novelty, they start to dislike it. So keeping this information in mind, we wanted to make GAN generations from existing data, but to introduce some novelty, not too much, that would make them pleasing. So our training data were a data set of fashion images. Not a lot, in fact, for training these big networks, but it worked quite well. So here, each image is generated from from a single Z vector. So in each box, in each image, you have a different random series of random numbers at the beginning. You start with a gray image, like you saw, and this is what happens during training. When the two networks are trained in parallel, the generator becomes to generate images that look really like real ones. Okay, so what can we do to do better than GAN generations themselves? So we can make the adversarial network predict other things than just simply 0 and 1. So we took advantage of the dataset of garment we have, and it contains some textures and shape labels. So the first thing we did was to, in addition of this 0-1 branch, we added a branch that predicts the shape class and another branch that predicts the texture class. And this intends to specialize the generation, and doing it so, it also stabilized the training procedure between the two networks. I wanted also to introduce really what is optimized by the two networks. It's pretty simple. So we call the parameters of the generator by theta g, and parameters of the discriminator network theta d. And the two losses are optimized sequentially, one after the other, and iteratively. And so here you have a minus and a mean. So in fact, you are maximizing this value, which is the prediction of the discriminator given a real image. And you are so it's going to predict 1 if it receives a real image, and here it's going to predict 0 if it receives a generated image. And for the generator loss, you see that the network D is trained but we train the generator G to fool the adversarial network by making it believe that the generation should receive a 1. So that the discriminator then, the generator generates images that are looking more and more real for the discriminator. Sorry, and I forgot to. So for the our additional loss for the classifier, it's added to the discriminator. So we in addition to the 0 and 1 prediction, we added a classification loss, and what we are going to do is add an additional loss to the generator. We called it creativity, but it's a bad name, but it's a loss to make the generator deviate from existing styles. We'll see after the exact expression. So first we can see the impact of class conditioning on the generation. Here are random samples if we don't use any classification, and here it is with classification. We observe that there are less artifacts like here for instance, with the classification loss, and also we are not allowed to show the images from this dataset, but the black color is much more prevalent also in the real dataset. Okay, so for the moment, the adversarial network won't have trouble to recognize generations. So for instance, this red shirt can be recognized 100% with 100% confidence having a uniform texture. So this is before, sorry, I skipped to it. This is before the generator is trained to generate easy to classify pieces. But if we introduce deviation loss to confuse the adversarial network shape or classification, it will change. So this is what we do now. We are adding an extra loss that makes the histogram of predictions more and more flat. And like this, the network kind of invents its own style. And here you see a specific example of a generation we can get with it. So yeah, thanks to this criterion, we produced very diverse textures by a model that has been trained to deviate here from the known textures only. And so here is the exact loss that we employ. So it's simply maximizing the entropy of the discriminator output for the class, for the corresponding class B. And so this is a little bit different than the previous paper, Creative Adversarial Network, which was a sum of binary cross entropies, but only really slightly different. And so to evaluate the performance using this criteria, we ran a human evaluation study because evaluating the success of GAN generations is difficult by automatic metrics. So in terms of realistic appearance and likability, here we have the classical GAN model, and our diverse deviation loss made our model increase the likability of people. Yeah, and also we also recover this Venn curve mentioned at the beginning of our talk by plotting the likability as a function of the novelty. Here you have the GAN produces very novel images, but they are not very liked, very popular. And here it's the models that were trained with some deviation criteria. And in terms of generations themselves, we show here a zoom at some of them. They are not produced at a sufficiently high resolution for being directly printed on fabrics, but they could be interpreted by designers, for instance, and to create unique pieces. It's also possible to navigate in the space of product images. I don't know if, yeah. And compute interpolation between the different Z vectors to produce this kind of morphings, and this can be a source of inspiration for creative people. Yeah. So now we in a follow-up work with Morgane Rivière and Yann Lequin, we wanted to take advantage of this data set where we have a uniform background to avoid some defaults we have in the generations, and also enforce a better class conditioning on the generation. So so first of all, to be able to train our model to a sufficiently high resolution, we employed what is called the progressive growing of GANs. It's a technique that was proposed by Karras and co-authors at ICLR. And it consists in training a small network to output a very low resolution image, like 4x4 at the beginning. It consists of only 1 or 2 layers, and the discriminator is the same, very small. And at each step of the training, there is a layer that is added to the network, and the resolution of the images are doubled, and so on, until reaching, in this example, 1024 resolution. And so we also proposed a decoupled architecture to get improvement on this dataset. Sorry, the colors are not great, but in this setting, we trained 2 different generators, one for the shapes and one for the texture. And we take the output of the shape and the output of the texture that are multiplied, so that we have better chance to eliminate defaults in shapes in the generations. And we trained the overall system using a discriminator. And it was not sufficient to use only a global discriminator at the end. because in this setting, the texture images were resulting into really uniform images, and all the texture details was present in the shape image. So this is why we had to add another discriminator just for the shapes. Okay, and these are the results we get using this method. So the basic progressive growing results and our results. Visually, I observe also more flaws, I think, here, but it's really hard to say. It would need to be confirmed by on more example, and I think this quality check is difficult to assess automatically. But what we can say with what we managed to prove is that we have a better class conditioning on the FashionGen dataset. So the images are looking like this. I mean, the generation look like this. And we trained a classifier to classify the different poses. So here you have example of front pose of 135 degrees, 45 degrees, and full body. And so we trained the classifier on the real images and applied it on the generations, and so that we get an overall average improvement of about 4%. Okay, so next, so maybe if you have questions about this part, we can do them now, or I move to the next one. Okay, let's move to the next one. So I'm really excited about this one because it's. I think the impact can be good. So currently we have great generative models, but they are still limited in resolution. And if we look, for instance, if we zoom at this picture, we can clearly see the pixels and. So also from an image understanding perspective, being able to generate vector images would be interesting since it would incorporate some simplification, compactness of the representation, which are desired properties of good data representation. And finally, we'd like to ease the introduction of user interaction in the generations. So with that in mind, we propose some parametric layer decomposition. And if we look at the related work to this approach, we can cite the layered GANs and the spiral method. They both employ adversarial networks to learn sequential generative models. The layered recursive GAN learn to generate foreground and background images that are stitched together using spatial transform network. In contrast, our method can generate virtually an infinite resolution at test time. And the most related to our work is a spiral approach of DeepMind that also aims at a vector image representation. So specifically, their results are displayed here at the left. Here you have the target images, and here are their reconstructions. And their method, in fact, it trains an agent in a reinforcement learning setting to synthesize programs that are executed by a graphic engine to reconstruct the image. So there is still progress to make in vector image generation, so good for us. So here is an example of image we can produce, but there will be sharper ones at the end if you follow everything. What we do is that our system learns in an unsupervised manner a decomposition of the images as some masks, superimposed mask of uniform color. For instance, you have a first mask, then a mask that is added in white, then the red mask is added, and etc. In contrast with the previous work, our approach relies only on simple architectures and losses, and without the need for LSTMs or reinforcement learning. So this is a slide to understand the approach, so maybe the most important one. So at the beginning, you have an image I0, so in fact here, I0 it will be just a black image, and you wish to reconstruct a target image here, I. So the first thing is to concatenate the two images, and there is a big convolutional neural network, that is a ResNet, that is trained to output two things. So mask parameters, P, and the color, so just a triplet of two RGB values. Then they go into what we call the mask blending modules. And so there is a multi-layer perceptron, F, that takes also some grid coordinates, x, y, and the mask parameter P. And from these inputs, it computes for each pixel of the mask value between 0 and 1. Then it is multiplied by the color, giving this result. And for the background image is computed using the 1 minus the mask, and is multiplied by the previous iteration. And so you get this layered representation that is easy to edit and where you can zoom as much as you want, because here at train time you can train it with some small resolution, and at test time you can give it the resolution you want. Okay, so yes, so this is the procedure if we want to perform reconstruction, but ultimately we would like to apply the same pipeline without requiring an image in input, so in a pure GAN setting. So this is what we have now. You don't need an image in input for this one. You just start with the previous iteration, extract features here, and concatenate a noise vector here. And same as before, you made it predict mask parameters, colors that are blended together with the grid coordinates, and so you have the result. Okay. So for the training criterion, we used a little bit improved version of the discriminator loss. So this is a kind of the state of the art, which produce more stable results. And so for the generator, it's the same loss as before. Yeah, maybe I should explain. So X is a real image coming from the data distribution, and X hat comes from the generated images. And this Wasserstein criteria, you predict a high value for D if it's a real image, and a lower value if it's another image. And this term avoids the gradient during training to explode, so bounds the gradient for a stable training. Okay, and so for the generator, it's still the same. So no change for the generator, and in the reconstruction setting, we can add. So we have one part which is just the data fidelity. So I mean pixel-wise distance between the generation intensity and the target, the image we want to reconstruct intensity. And if we want to have less blur in the results, we can add an adversarial loss to get sharper results. So here are the different results for the masks and for the different images at different iterations. you're only using the end results. It's a little bit blurry because we only used an L1 reconstruction loss at each step, but it was just to show you an idea of the mask. And so then this mask can be used for image editing, which is kind of nice. So here you can see what happens for the mask decomposition in a small video. And so here are examples of image editing. So in these two examples, we used the mask decomposition to introduce slight changes in the appearance of this man's face. We changed its brightness, in fact. And for the bird image, we selected a few masks as a foreground and kept only the colors of this. We can also edit the generated images themselves by removing the mask that contains the red nose on top or mixing the colors of different balls on the bottom. And here we demonstrate the potential of our approach at recovering vectorized image from a low resolution bitmap. We learned our network on the MNIST dataset, so 32 by 32 images, but we generate the output at 1024 resolution. And we display the original images, the bilinear reconstruction, and our result. Okay, and we also compared our results with different baselines given the same budget of parameters. So a simple autoencoder with a ResNet encoder, multi-layer perceptron, and another one with a ResNet as a decoder, and another one where we also give a grid as an input. So for this baseline, it has also the potential of having a vectorized result, but you'll see that it's performing less accurately. So here are some qualitative examples. We also computed quantitatively the PSNRs, but yeah, so we observe the same trend. So the number of parameters, typically, for our method, so we use 20 masks. The size of the parameter P is 10, and the color is three numbers. So in total, 260 parameters. And for the baseline, we chose the size of the code D to be the same. And so given that, our model obtains a reconstruction quality that is comparable with the baselines, while providing other advantages. So in particular, the only other parametric baseline, the MLP XY baseline, is by far outperformed by our iterative approach. The model with our model and the ResNet baseline provide clearly a better reconstruction. Yeah, interestingly, our method is the only one that is able to recover some uncommon detail here, like this plaster, and it also provides finer details here.
Is it varied by a Schmidt encoder or the regular?
No, it's a regular one. Yeah. And so the GAN results, yeah, they look a bit scary, but it's a first, to our knowledge, it's the first vectorized GAN generation, so we are really proud of them. We observed some high-frequency hallucination on the Celebay dataset that should be attenuated using a perceptual loss. What we are trying right now. We already see a big improvement for reconstruction. We recall that the present results are obtained in an unconditioned GAN setting, and we could also add conditioning. The nice thing is that we can generate images at any desired resolution by choosing in the input grid the desired size. And on ImageNet, it's crazy. Our model cannot capture the variability of the data distribution correctly, and generation can take very artistic shapes. But we can use them to decorate the office, for instance. And so when we use an adversarial loss or a perceptual loss, we move away from blurry images. These are reconstructed only with an L1 criterion, and this is increasing the adversarial weight. And lately we tried a perceptual loss, so it is adding similarity of the features extracted from the image and features extracted from the generation in the space of a network that was trained on ImageNet, so typically a VGG for those who know. Yeah, we are starting to get really nice results. And for the teaser image, yeah, the improvement is also great. We can start to have some textures of the hair, for instance. For future work, the training time is not crazy. It's about 2 days, but we have some ideas to make it faster. We would like to use also class conditioning to further improve the results, and we'd like to address the problem of having better texture modeling also. Okay, so I can switch. I have 10 minutes for the no? Sure. As you want. I can make it 5. Okay. So I wanted to show some applications in the future video prediction, future frame prediction. So it's kind of old now, 4 years. So we have the task of taking in input a video, like 4 frames here, and predict the next one and the next one, and so on. Here in red, you have our results. So how we did it? It's again a convolutional neural network. If we only use an L2 loss. Sorry, I'm pointing at so an L2 loss, so you have this result. And if you use a multi-scale architecture, an image gradient difference loss and adversarial training, you have sharper results. So the image gradient difference loss, it's simply that we compared in the space of taking the gradient of the true future, the gradient of the generation, and compare these two. And adversarial training, as before, we trained another network to say if it was a true sequence given in input or our generation plus the real past. So we did that, and then we moved to, we saw that the space of prediction was maybe too complex and errors were accumulating pretty fast. So we did some prediction in the space of semantic segmentations instead, to avoid this blurriness and simplify the problem. To predict several frames in the future, you have different solutions. Either you can predict the future segmentation altogether, but it uses a lot of computational capacity it's not a good idea. It's better to predict just one, and then take the last ones plus the predicted one, and predict the next one, etc. And you can even retrain the model to learn from its mistake by fine-tuning the model with the previous guesses. So this is what we had with, and we show that we are able in this video to get accurate results that are pretty accurate in predicting 0.5 seconds in the future. Then we realized that it was not the best way to model the problem, as we were learning some merging of objects and splitting of objects, and we thought it was better to move from the semantic segmentation space to the instance segmentation space. And so for this we used MaskRCNN, which is a state-of-the-art instance segmentation model that predicts basically bounding boxes for all objects, and then for each bounding box it's outputting a segmentation. And so with this, this system in fact makes predictions at multiple scales, but I've seen that I lost everyone, so I'm going to conclude very fast. And so we trained a model here to make the predictions in the feature space. So we computed features from MaskRCNN, huge feature maps of these sizes, in fact, and trained relatively small convnets here for each scale to predict the iteration at the next scale. And using the head of the networks, we managed to get pretty nice instance prediction in the future here. So to conclude on all these various works, I just wanted to name two open problems that I see. We still lack of automatic metrics to evaluate generative models performances, and for future prediction it would be nice to have training criteria that model different possible futures. For all that I presented, or almost all, there is code online. If you like, you can try. Thank you.
Any question?
So for the last part, for the future video prediction, so when you have a sequence of data, usually you would like to use a recurrent neural network, using, like memory.
LSTM.
Yeah. So, but your architecture is not exactly this one.
No, I think we could improve much the performances of these systems. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for the talk. Can you comment on the dimension for Z? Because depending on clauses, faces, or any view of the real world for ImageNet, it seems to be critical to choose. No.
I didn't notice such a critical choice. Honestly, we tried just the default parameters in. So in all our works, we took as baseline so either the DC GAN, and it was 256, I think. And the progressive growing of GANs was the same. So we didn't try others, in fact, but it would be...
Okay, so maybe let me rephrase it. Do you suspect that the failure for ImageNet is due to the small dimension for Z?
No, for the vector image...
The latent space?
For the vector image generation, no. In fact, Z was of size 10 only. So maybe, yeah. For ImageNet, my first move would be to make it condition on classes, just to, because on Celebi you recognize faces, right? And it's like it's what condition because it's sorted, it's only faces. For ImageNet, it may be the case that just a class would help.
We have some time for another question? No? Okay, then thank you again.